You're 7 months pregnant, walking into your luxurious Manhattan penthouse earlier than expected, only to hear muffled laughter from the bedroom. Heart pounding. You push the door open and there he is, your billionaire husband, tangled in the sheets with his young assistant, the woman who's been working late for months. The shock hits like a tidal wave. But in that moment of betrayal, you utter one single word that sets off a chain reaction. Fraud. That word doesn't just end a marriage, it topples an empire built on lies, money laundering, and international crime. What happens when a devoted wife turns the tables on her cheating husband and his scheming mistress? Stay tuned for this gripping tale of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate justice. If you've ever felt the sting of deception or cheered for a woman's comeback, hit that like button right now. It helps us bring more stories like this to you. Share this with a friend who needs some empowerment vibes. Drop a comment below. What's the one word you'd say in her shoes? And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Let's dive in. Emily Thompson. Kane stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Manhattan penthouse, one hand resting on her growing belly, the other holding a cup of herbal tea that had long since gone cold. At 38, she should have felt like she had everything a billionaire husband, a baby on the way, and a life of luxury that most people could only dream of. But as she watched the city bustling below, 24 stories down, a nagging feeling twisted in her chest like a knife she couldn't quite remove. The pregnant wife of tech mogul Alexander Kane should have been the happiest woman in New York. Instead, she felt like a ghost haunting her own life. Mrs. Kane. The soft voice of Maria, their housekeeper, broke through her reverie. Mr. Kane called. He won't be home for dinner again tonight. Another emergency board meeting. Emily nodded, forcing a smile. Of course. Thank you. Maria. Another emergency. Another late night. Another excuse. At 7 months pregnant, Emily had grown accustomed to dining alone in their palatial home, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the silence seemed to echo with unspoken truths she wasn't ready to confront. Alexander Kane Alex to his friends, though Emily sometimes wondered if he had any real ones, was the kind of man who commanded attention when he walked into a room. At 50, he still possessed the sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes that had captivated her at a charity gala 5 years ago. Back then, she had been a successful corporate lawyer with her own firm, handling mergers and acquisitions for mid-sized companies. She had her own money, her own reputation, her own life. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now. You don't need to work anymore, darling, Alex had said after their wedding, his hands gentle as they traced her face. Let me take care of you. Let me give you everything. And he had given her everything, everything, except the one thing she craved most. His presence. Kane Industries had grown from a small tech startup to a global empire under Alex's leadership, spanning artificial intelligence, financial technology, and cryptocurrency ventures. The media called him a visionary, a genius, the modern-day Midas who turned everything he touched to gold. Forbes had featured him on their cover 3 times in the past 2 years alone. But Emily knew better than anyone that golden empires could be built on foundations of sand. She moved away from the window, her designer maternity dress flowing around her as she walked through their home. Every surface gleamed with expensive taste. Italian marble floors, crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's cars, and artwork that museums would kill for. Yet the place felt cold, sterile, like a showroom rather than a home. In the master bedroom, Emily caught sight of herself in the antique mirror Alex had bought at auction for $250,000. Her auburn hair, once her pride, hung limp around her shoulders. Her green eyes, which Alex used to say reminded him of emeralds, looked tired and hollow. The expensive moisturizers and treatments couldn't hide the stress lines that had appeared over the past few months. When had she stopped recognizing herself? Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from her sister Sarah in Chicago. How's my favorite pregnant woman doing? Can't wait to meet my niece next month. Emily stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Everything's perfect. Can't wait either." Another lie in a life that seemed increasingly built on them, as if summoned by her dark thoughts. Her phone rang. Alex's name flashed on the screen, along with the photo she'd taken of him last Christmas. Handsome, smiling, looking like the perfect husband and father-to-be. "Hi, sweetheart." His smooth voice filled her ear, carrying that slight hint of a Boston accent he'd never quite lost despite years of speech coaching. "How are my girls doing today?" "We're fine," Emily said, settling into the armchair by the window. "Dr. Martinez says everything looks good at this stage." "That's wonderful. I'm sorry about dinner tonight. This deal in Singapore is falling apart, and we're trying to salvage it. You know how it is." She did know how it was. She knew about the late nights, the weekend conferences, the emergency calls at all hours. What she didn't know was when it had started feeling less like building an empire and more like building walls between them. "Will you be very late?" she asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "Probably. Don't wait up for me." "Okay. You need your rest." "Alex, I was thinking maybe we could go away for a weekend. Just the two of us, before the baby comes. Somewhere quiet, where we could just—" "That sounds great, sweetheart. But can we plan it after the Seoul expansion closes? This is a crucial time for the company." It was always a crucial time for the company. "Of course," Emily said. "I understand. You're amazing. I don't know what I'd do without you." After he hung up, Emily sat in the gathering darkness of their bedroom, one hand on her belly, where their daughter they'd decided to name her, Grace, was doing her nightly acrobatics routine. "Just you and me tonight, baby girl," she whispered. "Daddy's saving the world again." But as Emily prepared for another solitary evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in their marriage. It wasn't just the long hours or the missed dinners. It was the way Alex's eyes seemed to look through her lately, the way his kisses felt perfunctory, the way he talked about their future with all the passion of someone reading a grocery list. Maybe it was just pregnancy hormones. Maybe it was the stress of impending motherhood. Maybe she was imagining problems that didn't exist. Or maybe, a little voice in the back of her mind whispered, maybe she was finally seeing problems that had always been there. The next morning brought unseasonably warm October weather to Manhattan, the kind of day that made Emily remember why she'd fallen in love with the city all those years ago. She'd woken to find Alex already gone. No surprise there, but he'd left a note on his pillow. "Thinking of you and Grace. Love. A." Small gestures like that used to make her heart flutter. Now they felt like band-aids on a wound that kept getting deeper. Emily had an appointment with Dr. Martinez at 11, followed by lunch with her friend Jessica, one of the few people from her old life who still made time for her, as she dressed in a flowing navy maternity dress and comfortable flats. She caught herself wondering when she'd stopped caring about looking perfect for Alex. When she'd started her relationship with Alex, Emily had been meticulous about her appearance, designer suits, perfect makeup, hair that never dared to be out of place. She'd been a woman who knew her worth and dressed like it. These days, comfort had won out over style, and she couldn't remember the last time Alex had complimented her appearance. The ride to Dr. Martinez's office in their chauffeured Bentley should have been relaxing, but Emily found herself staring out the window, lost in thought. Their driver, James, had been with them for 3 years and had become something of a friend. He was one of the few people who treated her like Emily rather than Mrs. Kane. "Beautiful day, isn't it, Mrs. K?" James said, catching her eye in the rearview mirror. "It is. Almost too nice to be inside for appointments. How's Mr. Kane? Haven't seen much of him lately." Emily forced a smile. "You know how busy he gets. The company's expanding into new markets." James nodded, but Emily caught something in his expression, a flicker of something that might have been sympathy. Did even their driver pity her for being a neglected wife? Dr. Martinez's office was a haven of calm professionalism, all soothing colors and soft music designed to put expectant mothers at ease. Emily had been coming here for 7 months now, and she genuinely liked the woman who would deliver her daughter. Dr. Esperanza Martinez was in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that inspired confidence. "How are you feeling, Emily?" Dr. Martinez asked as Emily settled onto the examination table. "Physically, pretty good. The morning sickness is completely gone, and she's been very active. And emotionally, how are you holding up?" It was a simple question, the kind any doctor might ask a pregnant patient. But something in Dr. Martinez's tone suggested she was seeing more than Emily wanted to reveal. "I'm fine," Emily said automatically. "Just the usual pregnancy jitters." Dr. Martinez nodded as she began the ultrasound, but Emily caught her making a note in the chart that definitely wasn't about fetal development. "Your blood pressure is a little elevated," Dr. Martinez said after checking the readings. "Not dangerously so, but higher than I'd like to see. Are you under any particular stress?" Emily almost laughed. Stress. What could a pregnant wife possibly have to be stressed about when her billionaire husband was out building his empire every night until midnight? "Just the usual pregnancy worries," she said instead. "Emily," Dr. Martinez said gently, setting down her clipboard and looking directly at her patient. "I've been doing this for 25 years. I can tell when someone is carrying more than just a baby. If there's anything going on at home, anything that's affecting your well-being, I need to know about it." For a moment, Emily felt the overwhelming urge to tell this kind woman everything about the loneliness, about the growing distance between her and Alex, about the way she felt like she was disappearing into the role of billionaire's wife and losing herself completely. Instead, she shook her head. "Everything's fine at home. Alex is wonderful. We're both just excited about the baby." Dr. Martinez studied her for another moment, then nodded. "Okay, but I want you to monitor your stress levels. High blood pressure during pregnancy can lead to complications we'd rather avoid. Try to rest more, delegate what you can, and don't hesitate to ask for help when you need it." As Emily left the office with a new ultrasound photo in her purse, she wondered who exactly she was supposed to ask for help. Alex was too busy conquering the world to notice his wife was struggling. Her parents lived in Oregon and had their own health issues to deal with. Her sister Sarah had 3 kids of her own and lived halfway across the country. The truth was, despite being married to one of the most powerful men in America, Emily had never felt more alone. Her lunch with Jessica at a trendy Soho restaurant should have lifted her spirits, but even her oldest friend seemed like a stranger now. Jessica worked as a literary agent and lived the kind of independent, fast-paced life Emily used to have. As Jessica talked about her latest book deals and dating adventures, Emily felt like she was listening to someone speak a foreign language. "So what's new with you?" Jessica asked after updating Emily on her recent trip to the book fair in Frankfurt. "Besides the obvious," she added, gesturing toward Emily's belly. "Not much. Just preparing for the baby. You know, getting the nursery ready." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "That's it, Em. You used to run circles around corporate lawyers twice your age. Now you're telling me your biggest excitement is decorating a nursery." Emily bristled slightly. "There's nothing wrong with wanting to focus on my family." "Of course not, but you don't seem, I don't know, happy about it. When's the last time you and Alex went out together? Just the two of you?" Emily tried to remember. Their last romantic dinner had been when their anniversary 3 months ago. Alex had been in Tokyo for their anniversary. It might have been her birthday in August, but even then he'd taken several business calls during dinner. "We've both been busy," Emily said finally. Jessica leaned forward, her expression growing more serious. I'm worried about you. You seem different, smaller, somehow, like you're fading away." "I'm not fading away. I'm pregnant and tired and adjusting to a new phase of life. Not everyone can be jet-setting around Europe making million-dollar deals." The words came out sharper than Emily intended, and she immediately regretted them. Jessica had been nothing but supportive, and here she was lashing out because her friend had dared to voice what Emily already knew, but couldn't admit. "I'm sorry," Emily said quickly. "I didn't mean that. I'm just, it's been a long week." Jessica reached across the table and squeezed Emily's hand. "You don't have to apologize. But if you ever need to talk, really talk, I'm here." "Okay." Emily nodded, but even as she did, she knew she wouldn't take Jessica up on the offer. How could she explain that she was slowly suffocating in a life that looked perfect from the outside? How could she admit that she was beginning to suspect her husband was more interested in his empire than his wife? As James drove her home through the busy Manhattan streets, Emily closed her eyes and tried to imagine what her life would look like a year from now. She'd have a baby daughter, presumably still be married to Alex, still be living in their beautiful prison of a penthouse. The thought should have filled her with joy. Instead, it filled her with a dread she couldn't quite name. That evening, as Emily sat alone in their dining room, picking at a meal their personal chef had prepared, she made a decision. She was going to stop making excuses for Alex's absence and start paying attention to what was really happening in their marriage. She just had no idea how much she wasn't going to like what she found. Emily's decision to pay closer attention to her marriage yielded results faster than she'd expected, though not the kind she'd hoped for. It started small little inconsistencies that might have been nothing but began to form a pattern when examined together. The lipstick stain she found on Alex's collar 3 days after her lunch with Jessica was a shade she'd never worn, a bold red that was far too dramatic for her taste. When she mentioned it casually, Alex had laughed it off. "Probably from Mrs. Chen at the Seoul office," he'd said without missing a beat. "You know how affectionate those international business meetings can get. All that cheek kissing." Emily had nodded and said nothing, but Mrs. Chen was 73 years old and wore no makeup whatsoever. She'd met the woman twice during Kane Industries' expansion into South Korea. Then there were the phone calls that stopped abruptly when Emily entered the room, followed by Alex's hurried explanations about sensitive business negotiations and confidential investor information. The same man who used to discuss every major business decision with her now treated her like a security risk in her own home. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in late October. Emily was in the kitchen, trying to convince their chef to prepare something that wouldn't trigger her pregnancy nausea. When she heard Alex's phone ringing in his study, she wouldn't have thought anything of it. His phone rang constantly, except that this was his personal cell phone, not his business line, and it was almost 9 o'clock at night. The ringtone was different too. Instead of his usual classical music snippet, it was playing "Fly Me to the Moon," their wedding song. Emily felt her heart skip a beat. Alex had changed his ringtone to their wedding song, but when she tried to call him that morning, his phone had played the usual Beethoven. That meant he'd programmed specific ringtones for specific people. Emily found herself moving toward the study despite every rational part of her brain telling her to mind her own business. She told herself she was just going to let him know dinner would be ready in 20 minutes. That was all. But as she approached the partially open door, she heard Alex's voice, low and intimate, in a way that made her blood run cold. "I miss you too. Beautiful. This meeting is dragging on forever, but I should be able to get away by 10:30. Emily pressed herself against the wall outside the door, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure Alex would hear it. I know. I hate this too. But we have to be careful, especially now with Emily so close to delivery. The last thing we need is—" The rest of his sentence was lost as Emily's world tilted on its axis. She pressed one hand to her mouth to keep from making a sound, the other instinctively protective over her belly, where Grace was practicing her kicks. "What? No, she's fine. She doesn't suspect anything. Emily's always been trusting, maybe too trusting for her own good." Each word felt like a physical blow. Emily's legs went weak, and she leaned against the wall for support, fighting off a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. "Tomorrow night, that might work. I'll tell her I have a client dinner in Midtown. She won't ask questions. She never does anymore." Emily heard the sound of Alex's chair creaking. which meant he was probably getting up. She forced herself to move, making it to the kitchen just as she heard his footsteps approaching. "Hey, sweetheart," Alex said, appearing in the doorway with his usual confident smile. "Sorry about that call." Crisis with the Frankfurt office. Emily stared at her husband, this man she'd loved and trusted for 5 years, and felt something fundamental break inside her chest. He looked exactly the same, handsome, successful, concerned about her welfare, but now she could see the lie underneath it all. "Everything okay?" she managed to ask. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" The casual way he said it, the complete absence of guilt or shame in his expression, was somehow worse than the phone call itself. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a recent development. This was practiced, smooth, the behavior of a man who'd been living a double life for God, only knew how long. "You look pale," Alex said, moving closer and placing his hand on her forehead with what seemed like genuine concern. "Are you feeling all right?" Emily wanted to scream. She wanted to confront him right there, to demand to know who beautiful was and how long this had been going on. But something held her back, partly her own shock, partly a protective instinct for the baby she carried, and partly a growing realization that she needed to know more before she made any decisions. "Just tired," she said instead. "Maybe I'll go lie down." "Good idea. I need to head back to the office for a few hours anyway. This Frankfurt situation is really heating up." "Frankfurt?" "Right." Emily nodded and headed toward their bedroom, feeling Alex's eyes on her back. She wondered if he suspected she'd overheard anything. But when she glanced back, he was already reaching for his phone again, probably to call Beautiful back and reassure her that his clueless pregnant wife hadn't figured anything out. In their bedroom, Emily sat on the edge of their king-sized bed and stared at her wedding photos on the nightstand. She and Alex on their wedding day, both radiating happiness and love. Alex's arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder, both of them looking like they'd found their forever. What a fool she'd been. Emily's hands shook as she picked up her own phone and scrolled through her contacts. She stopped at Jessica's name, her finger hovering over the call button. What would she even say that she'd eavesdropped on her husband and discovered he was cheating, that her perfect marriage was apparently a complete lie, instead of calling Jessica? Emily found herself doing something she hadn't done in years. She opened her laptop and started researching private investigators in Manhattan. She told herself she needed to be sure before she did anything drastic. Maybe she'd misunderstood the phone call. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. But even as she tried to convince herself there might be another explanation, Emily knew the truth in her bones. Alex was having an affair, and judging by the practiced ease of that phone conversation, it wasn't his first. As she scrolled through PI websites, reading about services like matrimonial investigations and infidelity confirmation, Emily felt the first stirring of something that wasn't grief or shock. It was anger, and for the first time in months, anger felt better than despair. Emily hired Marcus Chen, no relation to the elderly Korean businesswoman, 3 days after overhearing Alex's phone call. Marcus came highly recommended by a discreet law firm that specialized in high-net-worth divorces, and his rates reflected his clientele's deep pockets. But after living as the pregnant wife of a billionaire for 5 years, Emily had access to enough money to hire the best. What she hadn't expected was how quickly Marcus would get results. "Mrs. Kane," Marcus said during their meeting at a coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from anywhere Alex or his colleagues might frequent. "I have to tell you, your husband isn't being particularly careful about covering his tracks." Emily's coffee went cold as Marcus spread photographs across the small table between them. Alex entering a luxury hotel with a young blonde woman. Alex and the same woman sharing what was clearly an intimate dinner at a restaurant Emily didn't recognize. Alex's hand on the woman's lower back as they walked into what appeared to be an upscale apartment building. "Do you know who she is?" Emily asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Sophia Martin, 28 years old, executive assistant to the CEO at Kane Industries. She's been working for your husband for about 18 months. 18 months. Emily tried to remember when Sophia had started working for Alex, when he'd mentioned hiring a new assistant to help manage his increasingly busy schedule. Had the affair started immediately, or had it developed over time? Did it matter? There's more, Marcus said gently. Financial records show he's been paying for her apartment in Tribeca. Rent is $8,000 a month. He's also paid for several shopping trips to high-end boutiques, a trip to Napa Valley last month when he told you he was in Seattle, and what appears to be jewelry purchases from Tiffany. Emily stared at the photos, her mind cataloging every lie Alex had told her over the past 18 months. Every late night at the office, every business trip, every time he'd been too tired or too stressed to spend time with his pregnant wife. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly. "I know this isn't easy to hear." "How long do you think it's been going on?" Emily asked. "Based on the financial records I've been able to access, at least a year, possibly longer." A year. Emily had been pregnant for 7 months, which meant Alex had been cheating on her before she'd even conceived Grace. While she'd been excitedly planning their family's future, he'd been building a separate life with another woman. "There's something else," Marcus said, his tone becoming more serious. "I've found some irregularities in Kane Industries' financial records that might be relevant to your situation." Emily looked up from the photographs. "What kind of irregularities?" "Unusual money transfers, payments to shell companies, offshore accounts that don't match any business interests I can find. I'm not an expert on corporate finance, but some of these transactions look suspicious. If your husband is involved in financial impropriety, it could affect your divorce proceedings significantly." Divorce. The word hit Emily like a physical blow, even though she'd been thinking it herself for days. Hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that terrified and relieved her simultaneously. "I'm not ready to think about divorce yet," Emily said carefully. "I just need to know what I'm dealing with." Marcus nodded and gathered up the photographs. "That's your choice, of course. But Mrs. Kane, if you decide to take action, time might be a factor. If there is financial misconduct involved, assets could disappear quickly." After Marcus left, Emily sat in the coffee shop for another hour, staring at her phone and trying to process everything she'd learned. Sophia Martin, executive assistant, 28 years old, pretty blonde, young enough to be Alex's daughter. Emily pulled up Kane Industries' website on her phone and navigated to the executive team page. There she was, Sophia Martin, smiling confidently at the camera in a crisp business suit. According to her bio, she had an MBA from Wharton and had previously worked for 2 other Fortune 500 companies. So she wasn't just some naive young woman who'd been seduced by a powerful older man. She was ambitious, educated, and apparently willing to sleep with her married boss to advance her career. Emily studied Sophia's face, trying to understand what Alex saw in her. She was undeniably beautiful, with the kind of polished perfection that came from expensive salon treatments and personal trainers. She looked nothing like Emily, where Emily was warm and curved. Sophia was sharp and angular, where Emily had always preferred understated elegance. Sophia radiated the kind of aggressive sexuality that caught attention and demanded it. But more than her appearance, what struck Emily about Sophia's photo was her expression. Even in a professional headshot, there was something calculating in her eyes, something that suggested she was used to getting what she wanted. Emily closed her laptop and headed home, her mind racing with questions and plans. She needed more information before she decided what to do next. She needed to understand exactly how deep this betrayal went and what other lies Alex had been telling her. Most importantly, she needed to meet Sophia Martin face to face. The opportunity came sooner than Emily expected. 2 days later, Alex mentioned casually over breakfast that Kane Industries was hosting a charity gala for children's literacy, an event Emily had somehow not been invited to despite her previous involvement in the company's philanthropic efforts. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Alex said when Emily asked about the oversight. "We decided to keep it small this year, just immediate stakeholders and board members. You know how these things can be when you're so close to your due date." Another lie, delivered with the same smooth confidence as all the others. "That's too bad," Emily said mildly. "I was looking forward to it. Will Sophia be there? I feel like I should meet your new assistant at some point." For just a moment, so briefly Emily almost missed it, Alex's expression flickered. "Sophia? Yes, of course. She'll be coordinating with the event planners. Maybe I should stop by the office sometime next week and introduce myself." It must be awkward for her. Having never met the boss's wife. "That's not necessary," Alex said quickly. "She's incredibly busy with the Soul expansion, and I don't want to add to her workload." How thoughtful of him, Emily mused, to be so concerned about his assistant's workload. That afternoon, Emily called Kane Industries' main number and asked to speak with Sophia Martin's office. When Sophia's secretary told her that Ms. Martin would be working late preparing for Thursday's charity gala, Emily knew exactly when and where she'd finally meet her husband's mistress. Kane Industries occupied 3 floors of a midtown high-rise, with Alex's executive suite on the top floor and spectacular views of Central Park. Emily had been there countless times over the years, usually for company parties or when she'd stop by to bring Alex lunch during their early marriage. Security knew her well enough that they barely glanced at her ID before waving her through to the elevator. The executive floor was mostly dark when Emily arrived at 7:30 on Wednesday evening, with only a few offices showing lights. Alex's corner office was dark. He'd told her he was having dinner with potential investors, but there was a light on in the adjacent office that Emily knew belonged to his assistant. Emily had dressed carefully for this encounter, choosing an elegant black maternity dress that emphasized her pregnancy rather than hiding it, along with the diamond earrings Alex had given her for their first anniversary. She wanted to look every inch the billionaire's pregnant wife when she met the woman who was trying to replace her. The door to Sophia's office was partially open, and Emily could hear the sound of typing from within. She knocked gently and pushed the door open wider. "Excuse me, Ms. Martin." Sophia looked up from her computer, and Emily saw her face go through a series of expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, and what might have been panic before settling into professional composure. "Mrs. Kane," Sophia said, standing quickly. "What a surprise. I wasn't expecting. Is everything all right? Is Mr. Kane?" "Alex is fine," Emily said, stepping into the office and closing the door behind her. "I was in the neighborhood and thought it was time we finally met. You know, face to face." Sophia was even more beautiful in person than in her photographs. Emily noticed with a strange detachment. She was wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves, and her makeup was flawless despite the late hour. She was also clearly terrified. "Of course," Sophia said, her voice slightly higher than normal. "It's wonderful to finally meet you. Mr. Kane talks about you all the time." "Hammer, does he?" Emily asked pleasantly, settling into the chair across from Sophia's desk. "How sweet. I'd love to hear what he says." Sophia sat back down, her hands fidgeting with a pen. "Just, you know, how excited he is about the baby, how much he loves you. The usual things." "The usual thing," Emily repeated. "How long have you been working for my husband, Sophia?" "About 18 months now." "And how are you finding it?" "Working for Alex can be demanding. He's a brilliant leader, very focused, very driven. I've learned so much from him." Emily studied Sophia's face, noting the flush creeping up her neck, the way she couldn't quite meet Emily's eyes. This woman was sleeping with her husband, had been for months, and yet she couldn't even look her in the face. "I'm sure you have," Emily said softly. "Alex does have so much to teach a young woman starting her career. I imagine you two spend a lot of time together, working late into the evening." "The job requires long hours," Sophia said defensively. "We're expanding into new markets, and there's a lot of coordination required. Of course, all those late-night meetings, weekend conferences, business dinners. It must be exhausting for both of you." Sophia's hands were shaking now. Emily noticed with a mixture of satisfaction and disgust. At least the woman had the decency to feel guilty about what she was doing. "Mrs. O'Kane," Sophia said suddenly, leaning forward in her chair, "I want you to know that Mr. O'Kane is completely devoted to you and your family, whatever you might think." "What might I think?" Emily interrupted, her voice still pleasant, but with an edge that made Sophia shrink back. "Is there something specific you think I should be concerned about?" "No," Sophia said quickly. "No, of course not. I just meant sometimes people misunderstand professional relationships, especially when there's a lot of travel and long hours involved." Emily nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right. People do love to gossip, don't they? They see a married man spending time with a beautiful young woman, and they immediately jump to conclusions." "Exactly," Sophia said, looking relieved. "The thing is," Emily continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "sometimes those conclusions are exactly right." The color drained from Sophia's face. Emily stood up, smoothing her dress over her pregnant belly. "It was lovely meeting you, Sophia. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other very soon." As Emily walked toward the door, Sophia's voice stopped her. "Mrs. Kane, please, it's not—" "He said you didn't." Emily turned back, and for the first time that evening, her mask of polite composure slipped. "He said I didn't—" "What?" "Sophia, love him enough. Pay attention to him, give him what he needed." Emily's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it. "Let me tell you what Alex didn't tell you. I gave up my career for him. I gave up my independence, my friends, my entire identity to be his perfect wife. And while I was doing that, while I was carrying his child, you were spreading your legs for him in hotel rooms." Sophia flinched as if she'd been slapped. "But here's what neither of you understand," Emily continued. "I'm not just Alex Kane's pregnant wife. I'm Emily Thompson Kane, and I built my own empire before I ever met your boss. I know how to fight, and I know how to win. So if you think you're going to destroy my family and walk away with my husband and his money, you're about to learn exactly how wrong you are." Emily left Sophia sitting in her office, probably wondering whether she should call Alex immediately or wait until morning. Either way, Emily's marriage as she'd known it was over. It was time to start planning her war. The call came at 2:30 in the morning, jarring Emily from the first decent sleep she'd had in weeks. Alex's name lit up her phone screen, and for a moment she considered not answering, but curiosity won out over self-preservation. "Hello," she said, her voice deliberately groggy. "Em, thank God you answered." Alex sounded panicked, which was unusual for a man who prided himself on maintaining control in every situation. "Listen, I need to explain something. Sophia called me tonight, and she's upset because she thinks she said something wrong when you visited the office." Emily sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. So Sophia had called him immediately after their confrontation. "Interesting. I don't know what she's talking about," Emily said innocently. "I just stopped by to introduce myself. She seemed nice enough. She said you seemed upset about something. She's worried she gave you the wrong impression about our working relationship." "What kind of wrong impression could she have given me?" There was a pause that lasted several seconds too long. "You know how young women can be? Sometimes they overthink things, worry that people will misinterpret professional interactions." Emily almost laughed at the irony. Here was Alex, spinning the same lie Sophia had tried to sell her, both of them apparently convinced that she was too naive or too trusting to see through their deception. "Alex, are you having an affair with your assistant?" The question hung in the air between them like a live wire. Emily held her breath, part of her hoping against hope that he would deny it convincingly, that there would be some explanation that made sense of everything she discovered. "Emily, how can you even ask me that? Of course I'm not having an affair. I love you. I love our family." But his voice lacked conviction, and Emily could hear the carefully constructed nature of his response. He wasn't denying it because it wasn't true. He was denying it because he'd been caught unprepared and was buying time to construct a better lie. Then why are you paying for Sophia's apartment? This time the silence stretched so long that Emily wondered if the call had been dropped. When Alex finally spoke, his voice had changed completely. Gone was the panic, replaced by something cold and calculating that Emily had never heard from him before. Who told you that? Does it matter? Is it true? Emily, I think we need to sit down and have a serious conversation when I get home. Where are you now? Another pause. I'm at the office dealing with the soul expansion crisis. Emily looked at the clock on her nightstand. 2:30 in the morning. It's the middle of the night. Alex, Korea is 14 hours ahead of us. I'm on a conference call with the soul team. He was lying. Emily knew he was lying. And what was worse, Alex knew that she knew. They were having their first completely honest conversation in months, and it was built entirely on acknowledged deceptions. When will you be home? Emily asked. A few hours, us maybe around 6. We should talk then. After Alex hung up, Emily sat in their darkened bedroom, one hand on her belly where Grace was doing her middle-of-the-night gymnastics routine. Her daughter seemed to sense her mother's distress, kicking more forcefully than usual. It's okay, baby girl, Emily whispered. Mama's going to figure this out. But even as she said the words, Emily wasn't sure what she was trying to figure out. Whether to save her marriage or how to end it, whether to fight for Alex or cut her losses and run, whether to expose him publicly or handle things quietly for the sake of their unborn daughter. At 3:15, Emily gave up on sleep and made her way to Alex's study. If he was going to be home at 6 for a serious conversation, she had less than 3 hours to gather whatever evidence might be in their house before he had a chance to destroy it. The study was Alex's private domain, a masculine retreat filled with expensive leather furniture, first edition books, and technology that cost more than most people's cars. Emily had always respected his privacy in this room, rarely entering unless invited. Now she realized how naive that respect had been. Alex's personal laptop was password protected, but Emily knew her husband well enough to guess his password on the third try, Grace Kane 2025, their daughter's name, and expected birth year. For a brilliant businessman, Alex was surprisingly predictable in some ways. What Emily found in his email and browser history was worse than she'd expected. The affair with Sophia wasn't just sexual they'd been planning together. Talking about their future together, discussing what would happen after Emily, as if she were already relegated to the past. There were emails about business deals Emily had never heard of, financial transactions that seemed questionable even to her legally trained eye, and communications with people whose names she didn't recognize, but whose messages seemed to reference activities that sounded illegal. But the worst discovery was a draft email Alex had apparently written but never sent. Saved in his drafts folder, with Sophia's email address, in the recipient line, I know you're frustrated with having to maintain the pretense, but it won't be much longer now. Emily is completely focused on the pregnancy and doesn't suspect anything. Once the baby is born and we've had a few months to establish the new normal, I can start the divorce proceedings. The prenup will limit her claim to assets, and by then most of the questionable transactions will be far enough in the past that they shouldn't surface during proceedings. We just need to be patient a little longer. I love you. Emily read the email 3 times, each reading making her feel sicker. Alex wasn't just cheating on her, he was planning to divorce her after she gave birth to his child, and he'd structured his business affairs to minimize her financial settlement. He'd been planning this for months, maybe longer, while she'd been excitedly preparing for their family's future. She printed the email and several others, along with financial documents that looked suspicious. She wasn't sure what she'd do with the evidence, but she wanted to have it before Alex came home and potentially destroyed it. At 5:30, Emily heard Alex's key in the front door. She quickly shut down his computer and made her way back to their bedroom, stuffing the printed emails into a folder that she hid in her dresser drawer under her maternity clothes. Emily, Alex called softly as he entered the bedroom. Are you awake? She pretended to stir sleepily. Alex, you're home early. The conference call ended sooner than expected. He sat on the edge of the bed and reached for her hand. We need to talk about what happened tonight. Emily looked at her husband in the dim morning light, filtering through their curtains. He was still handsome, still looked like the man she'd fallen in love with 5 years ago. But now she could see the calculation behind his concerned expression, the way he was studying her face for signs of what she knew or suspected. "Okay," she said simply. "Sophia is worried that she gave you the wrong impression about our working relationship. She's young, and sometimes she doesn't realize how things might look to other people." "What kind of impression should I have?" Alex squeezed her hand. "Emily, I need you to know that I have never been unfaithful to you. Never. Yes, I work closely with Sophia, and yes, we spend a lot of time together because of business demands, but there is nothing inappropriate happening between us." He was looking directly into her eyes as he said it, his voice steady and convincing. If Emily hadn't seen the photographs, heard the phone conversations, and read the emails, she might have believed him. He was that good at lying. "Then why are you paying for her apartment?" Alex's expression didn't change, but Emily saw his jaw tighten slightly. "How did you hear about that? Does it matter? Is it true?" "It's not what you think. Sophia was having financial difficulties when she started working for me. Her previous employer had stiffed her on commission payments, and she couldn't afford decent housing in Manhattan. I helped her out as an advance against future bonuses. It's not uncommon in corporate settings." The lie was so smooth, so reasonable, that Emily almost admired the skill behind it. If she didn't know better, she might have accepted this explanation and felt guilty for suspecting him. What about the trips to Napa Valley? The jewelry purchases, the hotel rooms? This time Alex did flinch, and Emily saw the exact moment when he realized that she knew much more than he'd thought possible. "Emily," he said carefully, "I think someone has been feeding you false information, probably someone who's trying to cause problems in our marriage for their own reasons. Show me your credit card statements for the past 6 months. What? If you're not lying, if all these charges have innocent explanations, show me your statements. Right now." Alex stood up from the bed, and Emily saw him transform from loving husband into the ruthless businessman who'd built a global empire. When he looked at her now, there was no warmth, no affection, just cold calculation. "I don't have to prove anything to you, Emily. I've told you the truth. And if you don't trust me, that's your problem to work through. It's my problem." Emily struggled to sit up in bed, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. "My husband is cheating on me with his assistant, planning to divorce me after I give birth. And it's my problem. You're being paranoid and irrational. Pregnancy hormones can—" "Don't you dare," Emily said, her voice rising. "Don't you dare blame this on pregnancy hormones when you're the one who's been living a double life for over a year." Alex stared at her for a long moment, and Emily could practically see him making calculations, deciding how much to admit and how much to continue denying. "Fine," he said finally. "Yes, I've been seeing Sophia. It's not what I planned to happen. But Emily, you have to understand our marriage has been struggling for a long time. You've become so focused on the pregnancy, so withdrawn from everything else. Sophia understands the pressures I'm under in ways that you don't." The casual way he said it, as if his affair was a natural consequence of her failings as a wife, hit Emily like a physical blow. But underneath the hurt was a growing anger that felt cleaner and stronger than anything she'd felt in months. "How long?" she asked. "Does it matter? How long, Alex?" "About a year." Emily nodded slowly. "So you started cheating on me while I was trying to get pregnant with your child. It wasn't like that. Get out. Emily, let's be rational about this. We have a baby coming. We have a life together. Yes, I made mistakes. But we can work through this if you're willing to. Get out of my sight before I do something we'll both regret." Alex stood there for another moment, as if considering whether to continue the conversation or cut his losses. Apparently deciding that retreat was the better option, he grabbed some clothes from his dresser and headed toward the door. "We'll talk more when you've had time to calm down," he said, But Emily, I hope you'll think carefully before you do anything rash. You have more to lose than I do. After he left, Emily sat in their bed, one hand on her belly, and felt the last of her illusions about her marriage crumble away. Alex wasn't just cheating on her, he was threatening her. The man who'd promised to love and protect her was warning her that he held all the power in their relationship. It was the biggest mistake he'd ever made, because Emily Thompson Kane was done being the trusting, naive, pregnant wife. It was time to remind Alex and his mistress exactly who they were dealing with. Emily's first call was to her sister Sarah in Chicago, made at 7 in the morning, while Alex was presumably finding somewhere else to sleep off his guilt. Em, is everything okay? You never call this early. Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Alex is having an affair, and I need to come stay with you for a few days while I figure out what to do next. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Emily wondered if the call had dropped. Sarah, I'm here. I'm just Emily. Are you sure? Alex has always seemed so devoted to you. Emily almost laughed at the irony. Even her own sister had bought into the perfect marriage facade that she and Alex had presented to the world. I caught him red-handed. Sarah, I have evidence, photos, emails, financial records. He's been planning to divorce me after the baby's born, and he's been moving money around to hide assets from me. Oh my God, Emily, I'm so sorry. Of course you can come here. Today, if possible, I need to be somewhere safe while I consult with lawyers and figure out my next steps. What about the baby should you be traveling this close to your due date? Emily looked down at her belly, where Grace was doing her morning stretches. At 34 weeks, she was technically safe to travel, though Dr. Martinez would probably prefer she stay close to her delivery hospital. I'll call Dr. Martinez and get clearance. But Sarah, I can't stay here. Not with Alex threatening me. He threatened you. Emily filled her sister in on the details of their early morning confrontation, including Alex's parting comment about her having more to lose than he did. That bastard, Sarah said with unusual vehemence. Sarah was a kindergarten teacher and Sunday school volunteer who rarely used strong language. Emily, you pack whatever you need, and I'll book you a flight. Tom can pick you up at O'Hare. After hanging up with Sarah, Emily called Dr. Martinez's office and was told she could travel until 36 weeks as long as she felt comfortable and had access to medical care at her destination. Her next call was to Marcus Chen. Mrs. Kane, I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon. Things have accelerated, Marcus. I confronted my husband last night, and he's admitted to the affair. I need to move quickly now before he has a chance to hide assets or destroy evidence. I see. What do you need from me? Everything. Financial records, evidence of the affair, documentation of any business irregularities you mentioned. I'm going to Chicago for a few days to consult with divorce attorneys, and I want to be armed with everything I need. I can have a complete report ready by this afternoon. Mrs. Kane, if I may ask, are you planning to go public with this information? Emily considered the question. Part of her wanted to expose Alex and Sophia publicly, to let the world see what kind of man Alex really was behind his carefully constructed image. But another part of her wanted to handle this strategically, using what she knew to maximum advantage. I'm not sure yet. Why? Because if you are, we should be very careful about how we present the evidence. Your husband is a public figure, and there could be legal ramifications if we're not careful. Understood. Just get me everything you have. Emily's next call was the hardest one to her parents in Oregon. Her father had never particularly liked Alex, though he'd been too polite to say so directly. Her mother, on the other hand, had been thrilled when Emily married a successful businessman who could provide for her daughter's future. Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need you to not lecture me about it. Emily, what's wrong? You sound terrible. Alex is having an affair. Has been for over a year. I'm leaving him. The silence that followed was different from Sarah's shocked pause. Emily's mother, Patricia Thompson, was a woman who believed in making marriages work regardless of the obstacles, and Emily could practically hear her formulating arguments about forgiveness and counseling. and thinking of the baby. Emily, honey, I know this must be devastating news, but maybe you should consider... Mom, stop. I know what you're going to say, and I need you to understand that this isn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a midlife crisis. Alex has been systematically deceiving me while planning to divorce me after I give birth to his child. He's been moving money around to hide it from me, and when I confronted him, he threatened me. He threatened you, Emily. If that's true, it is true. And Mom, I need you and Dad to support my decision here. I can't fight Alex and worry about disappointing you at the same time. Emily heard her mother talking to her father in the background, explaining the situation in hushed tones. Emily, her father's voice came on the line. What do you need from us? Trust her father to cut straight to the practical matters. David Thompson was a retired engineer who approached problems systematically and never wasted time on recriminations when action was needed. I'm going to Chicago to stay with Sarah while I consult with lawyers. I may need character witnesses and I may need emotional support, but mostly I just need to know you're on my side. Of course we're on your side, her father said firmly. We never liked that pompous ass anyway. David, Emily heard her mother protest in the background. What, I'm 68 years old. Patricia, I'm done pretending to like people who treat my daughter badly. Despite everything, Emily found herself smiling for the first time in days. The rest of the morning was spent packing carefully chosen items, clothes for a week in Chicago, important documents Alex might try to access, and personal items that held sentimental value. Emily also packed her laptop and the printed emails she'd found in Alex's study. At noon, Marcus Chen arrived at her building with a thick folder of evidence that would have impressed an FBI investigator. Photos, financial records, phone logs, credit card statements, hotel reservations, and even security footage from the building where Sophia lived, showing Alex coming and going at all hours. Mrs. Kane, Marcus said as he handed over the folder, I want you to know that in 15 years of investigating marital misconduct, I've rarely seen deception this systematic and calculating. Your husband has been living a complete double life. Emily flipped through the evidence, her anger growing with each page. There were receipts for jewelry she'd never seen, restaurant charges for meals she'd never shared, hotel bills for rooms she'd never slept in. Alex had been spending their money to wine and dine his mistress while telling Emily they needed to be careful about expenses, with a baby coming. There's something else, Marcus said. Those financial irregularities I mentioned, I think your husband may be involved in money laundering. I've found evidence of transactions that don't correspond to any legitimate business activities Kane Industries is involved in. Emily looked up sharply. Money laundering? Are you sure? I'm not an expert on financial crimes, but the pattern of transactions looks suspicious. Large amounts of money being moved through shell companies, converted to different currencies, then moved again. If I were you, I'd have a forensic accountant look at these records. Emily nodded, adding forensic accountant to her growing list of professional services she'd need in the coming weeks. At 2 o'clock, James drove her to JFK Airport, and Emily could see in his eyes that he knew something was wrong, but was too professional to ask questions. Will you be returning soon, Mrs. K? He asked as he helped her with her luggage. I'm not sure, James, but thank you for everything. James studied her face for a moment, then pressed a business card into her hand. If you ever need anything, Mrs. K, anything at all you call me. I've seen a lot of things working for wealthy families, and I know the difference between good people and bad people. As Emily settled into her first-class seat for the flight to Chicago, she opened Marcus's folder one more time and studied the evidence of Alex's betrayal. But instead of feeling devastated, she found herself feeling something she hadn't experienced in months. Powerful. Alex had made a crucial mistake when he threatened her that morning. He'd revealed that he saw her as weak, someone who could be intimidated into accepting whatever scraps he was willing to throw her. He'd forgotten that before she became his wife. Emily Thompson had been a successful lawyer who'd built her own practice and won cases against opponents who'd underestimated her. It was time to remind Alex exactly who he'd married, And when she was done, he'd realized that threatening Emily Thompson Kane was the biggest mistake of his life. Sarah's house in Evanston was everything Emily's Manhattan penthouse wasn't: warm, lived in, and filled with the comfortable chaos of a family with 3 children under 10. As Emily sat at Sarah's kitchen table with a cup of tea and a plate of homemade cookies, she felt more at home than she had in months. Aunt Emily. 8-year-old Rebecca launched herself into Emily's arms, careful of her pregnant belly. "Mom said you're having a baby girl. Can I help name her?" "Rebecca, let Aunt Emily get settled," Sarah said, but Emily waved her off. "It's okay. Her name is going to be Grace. That's a pretty name. Will she come visit us?" The innocent question hit Emily like a blow. A month ago, she would have answered confidently that of course Grace would visit her cousins, that they'd have family vacations and holidays together. Now she had no idea what her daughter's life would look like. "I hope so, sweetheart," Emily said instead. Emily. After Sarah's husband Tom got the kids settled with dinner and homework, the 3 adults sat in the living room, and Emily spread Marcus's evidence across the coffee table. "Jesus, Emily," Tom said, studying the financial records. "This isn't just an affair, this looks like fraud." Tom was a CPA who specialized in corporate finance, and Emily had been hoping he'd be able to interpret the suspicious transactions Marcus had identified. "That's what the investigator said." "What exactly are we looking at here?" Tom picked up several documents and compared them. "These transfers don't make sense for legitimate business purposes. Look, here's a payment of $2 million to something called Meridian Holdings, which according to this report is a shell company with no actual business operations. The money goes in, gets converted to cryptocurrency, then disappears into offshore accounts. Is that illegal? If it's being done to hide assets from tax authorities or launder money from illegal activities? Absolutely. Even if the original money is legitimate, this kind of obfuscation suggests your husband is trying to hide something." Sarah, who'd been quietly studying the photos of Alex and Sophia, looked up with a grim expression. "Emily, I have to ask, did Alex ever give you any reason to suspect he might be involved in illegal activities?" Emily thought about the question seriously. "Not illegal, exactly, but he's always been very secretive about certain aspects of his business. He'd take phone calls in private, refuse to discuss certain deals, travel to meetings without telling me who he was meeting with. I always assumed it was normal business confidentiality." "This goes way beyond normal confidentiality," Tom said. "Emily, I think you need to talk to someone who specializes in financial crimes, not just divorce law." The next morning, Emily met with Catherine Walsh, a partner at one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms, who specialized in high-net-worth divorces involving complex asset structures. Catherine was in her 50s, with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that suggested she'd won more battles than she'd lost. "Mrs. Kane," Catherine said after reviewing the evidence Emily had brought, "I have to tell you, this is one of the most comprehensive cases of marital deception I've seen. Your husband hasn't just been having an affair, he's been systematically planning for your divorce while actively deceiving you about his intentions." "What does that mean for me legally?" "It means several things. First, the prenuptial agreement you signed may not be enforceable given evidence of fraud and concealment. Second, if your husband is involved in illegal financial activities, those assets could be subject to seizure, which actually works in your favor. Third, the systematic nature of his deception gives us grounds to argue for a much larger settlement than your prenup would normally allow." Emily felt a flicker of hope for the first time in days. "So I'm not going to be left with nothing?" "Far from it. But Mrs. Kane, I need to ask you a difficult question. Based on this evidence, I believe your husband may be involved in serious financial crimes. Are you prepared for the possibility that pursuing your divorce aggressively might result in criminal charges against him?" Emily thought about Alex's threats, about his casual dismissal of her feelings, about the way he'd planned to discard her after using her to provide him with an heir. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'm prepared for that." Catherine nodded approvingly. "Good, because if we're going to do this, We're going to do it right. I'm going to recommend that we bring in a forensic accountant and potentially coordinate with federal authorities if we find evidence of money laundering or tax evasion. How long will all this take? That depends on how cooperative your husband is willing to be. If he fights us, this could take years. But Mrs. Kane, I have to warn you, men like your husband don't give up easily. If you do this, you need to be prepared for him to play dirty. Emily thought about Alex's parting words the morning before. You have more to lose than I do. He's already playing dirty, she said. I'm just evening the odds. That afternoon, Emily called Dr. Martinez to schedule an appointment with a Chicago obstetrician, just in case her stay extended longer than planned. She also called her lawyer back in New York to begin the process of legally separating her affairs from Alex's. Most importantly, she called Marcus Chen with new instructions. Marcus, I need you to start documenting everything. Every meeting Alex has with Sophia, every financial transaction, every lie he tells about his whereabouts. I want a complete record of his activities. Are you planning to file for divorce? I'm planning to destroy him, Emily said simply. He made the mistake of threatening me while I'm carrying his child. Now he's going to learn what happens when you underestimate Emily Thompson Kane. That evening, as Emily helped her nephews with their homework and listened to her niece chatter about her day at school, she felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced in months. For too long, she'd been passive in her own life, letting Alex make decisions and set the direction of their relationship. She'd convinced herself that being supportive meant being silent, that loving him meant accepting whatever scraps of attention he was willing to give her. But watching Sarah interact with her children, seeing the way Tom looked at his wife with genuine affection and respect, Emily realized what she'd been missing: a real partnership, a relationship built on honesty and mutual support rather than power and control. Alex had given her that once, or at least she'd thought he had, but maybe the man she'd fallen in love with had never really existed. Maybe she'd been in love with a carefully constructed image, while the real Alex Kane had always been the cold, calculating businessman who'd threatened her that morning. It didn't matter now. The Alex she'd loved was gone, if he'd ever existed at all. The Alex who remained was her enemy, and Emily was going to treat him as such. As she settled into the guest room that night, Emily placed her hands on her belly and spoke softly to her unborn daughter. Grace, I want you to know that your mommy's going to fight for you, not just for money or property, but for the kind of life you deserve. A life where the women around you are strong and independent, where you'll never have to choose between love and self-respect. Grace kicked in response, and Emily chose to interpret it as approval. The war was about to begin, and Emily Thompson Kane was ready. Emily's battle plan crystallized over the next 3 days in Chicago. With Catherine Walsh's guidance, she assembled a team that would have impressed a Fortune 500 CEO, a forensic accountant, a private investigator who specialized in corporate espionage, a media relations expert, and a criminal lawyer who'd handled several high-profile white-collar cases. The strategy was multi-pronged and brutal in its precision. Emily would file for divorce on grounds of adultery and fraud, simultaneously triggering investigations into Alex's business practices while systematically destroying the public image he'd spent years cultivating. The key, Catherine explained during one of their marathon strategy sessions, is timing. We need to hit him from multiple directions before he has time to mount a defense or destroy evidence. Emily nodded, studying the timeline they'd mapped out. What about Sophia? Do we go after her too? That depends on what we find regarding her involvement in the financial irregularities. If she's just sleeping with your husband, that's between them. If she's actively participating in money laundering or fraud, she becomes a criminal matter. On Thursday morning, Emily got her answer. Marcus Chen called with information that changed everything. Mrs. Kane, I've been following Sophia Martin as you requested, and yesterday she met with a man named Viktor Petrov at a restaurant in Little Italy. Petrov is a known associate of several Russian oligarchs who've been sanctioned for money laundering activities. Emily's blood went cold. You think she's involved in the financial crimes? I think she's in up to her neck. I have photos of her handing Petrov an envelope, and I was able to get close enough to hear part of their conversation. They were discussing the Kane pipeline and how to accelerate the timeline before the wife becomes a problem. So they know I'm investigating. They suspect something. But Mrs. Kane, this is bigger than marital infidelity. If your husband is laundering money for Russian criminals, we're talking about potential terrorism financing, sanctions violations, and treason. Emily sat in Sarah's kitchen, staring out at the autumn afternoon, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet once again. She'd thought she was dealing with a cheating husband and his ambitious mistress. Instead, she'd apparently stumbled into an international criminal conspiracy. Marcus, I need you to turn everything you have over to the FBI. Today. Are you sure once we involve federal authorities, this becomes much bigger than a divorce case? Emily thought about Grace, about the kind of world she'd be bringing her daughter into if Alex's crimes went unpunished. She thought about other wives and children who might be hurt if Alex's criminal network continued to operate. I'm sure. Do it. 2 hours later, Emily received a call from Special Agent Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Mrs. Kane, we've received some very interesting information from your private investigator. We'd like to meet with you as soon as possible. I'm in Chicago right now. That's fine. We have agents there. Can you meet us tomorrow morning? Emily agreed, then called Catherine Walsh to inform her that their divorce case had just become a federal investigation. Emily, Catherine said carefully, I need you to understand what this means. If your husband is involved in the kind of activities the FBI is investigating, this case will be front-page news. Your privacy, your daughter's privacy, your family's privacy, all of that goes out the window. I understand. Do you? Because once this becomes public, you can't take it back. Your daughter will grow up with this as part of her story. Are you prepared for that? Emily closed her eyes and thought about the alternative, allowing Alex to continue his crimes, to divorce her quietly while keeping his criminal enterprise intact, to raise Grace in the shadow of his corruption. I'm prepared for that, she said firmly. That evening, Emily called her parents to warn them about what was coming. Mom, Dad, I need you to know that this situation with Alex is about to become very public and very serious. The FBI is involved now. The FBI! Her mother's voice rose to a near shriek. Emily, what on earth? Alex isn't just cheating on me, Emily said patiently. He's apparently involved in money laundering for Russian criminals. When I file for divorce, it's going to be national news. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily, her father said finally, are you safe? Is the baby safe? For now, yes. But Dad, I need you and Mom to be prepared for reporters, for people asking questions about our family. This is going to be ugly. What do you need from us? Her father asked, just as he had before. Just support, and maybe prayers, if you're so inclined. Friday morning's meeting with the FBI took place in a nondescript office building in downtown Chicago. Special Agent Chen was a serious woman in her 40s who reminded Emily of Catherine Walsh, clearly competent and used to dealing with complex cases. Mrs. Kane, Agent Chen began, we've been investigating Kane Industries for several months as part of a larger inquiry into money laundering operations with ties to Russian organized crime. Your husband's company has been facilitating the movement of illegal funds through a network of shell companies and cryptocurrency exchanges. Emily nodded, trying to process the magnitude of what she was hearing. What we didn't know, Agent Chen continued, was the identity of the person inside Kane Industries who was coordinating these activities. Based on the evidence your investigator provided, we believe that person is Sophia Martin. Sophia is the mastermind. We think she's the primary liaison between your husband and the criminal organization. She may have initiated the relationship with your husband specifically to gain access to his company's resources. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying she seduced Alex as part of a criminal conspiracy. It's possible. What we know for certain is that she's been coordinating financial transactions that have moved over $50 million in illegal funds through Kane Industries over the past 18 months. $50 million. Emily tried to wrap her mind around the scope of what Alex had gotten himself involved in. Mrs. Kane, Agent Chen said, we'd like your permission to wiretap your husband's phones and place surveillance on both him and Ms. Martin. We'd also like you to consider wearing a wire during any conversations you have with your husband. You want me to spy on Alex? We want you to help us gather evidence that could prevent much more serious crimes from being committed. Mrs. Kane, the people your husband is working with don't just launder money. They finance terrorism, human trafficking, and political corruption. If we can stop this network, we could save lives. Emily thought about Grace, about the world she'd be bringing her daughter into. She thought about all the other families that might be destroyed if Alex's criminal associates continued their operations. What do you need me to do? Agent Chen smiled for the first time since their meeting began. We need you to go home and act like nothing has changed. Continue your divorce proceedings, but don't let your husband know about our investigation. Can you do that? Emily thought about Alex's threats, about his casual dismissal of her concerns, about the way he'd planned to discard her after using her to provide him with an heir in unwitting cover for his crimes. Agent Chen, Emily said, my husband made the mistake of threatening me while I'm carrying his child. I'm not just willing to help you destroy him, I'm looking forward to it. As Emily left the FBI office, she realized that her war with Alex had just escalated far beyond a simple divorce case. She was now a federal informant in an international criminal investigation. Alex had no idea what was coming for him, but he was about to find out. Emily's flight back to New York on Monday morning felt like crossing into enemy territory. She'd spent 5 days in Chicago planning her attack, gathering federal agents as allies, and preparing for a battle that would determine not just her future, but potentially the safety of countless other people affected by Alex's criminal enterprise. Dr. Martinez had cleared her for travel back to New York, but wanted to see her immediately upon her return. At 35 weeks pregnant, Emily was cutting it close, but she couldn't afford to have Grace born in Chicago while the most important confrontation of her life was about to unfold in Manhattan. James was waiting for her at JFK, his familiar face a welcome sight after days surrounded by lawyers and federal agents. Welcome home, Mrs. K, he said, though something in his expression suggested he knew home was no longer an accurate description of her relationship with the penthouse. Thank you, James. How has Mr. Kane been while I was away? James glanced around carefully before answering. Stressed, I'd say. Lot of phone calls, lot of meetings at odd hours. And that Ms. Martin has been at the penthouse several times. Emily felt her jaw clench. Alex had been bringing Sophia to their home while she was away. The audacity was breathtaking, even for him. Thank you for telling me. Mrs. K, James said as they sat in traffic approaching Manhattan. I don't know what's going on between you and Mr. Kane, and it's not my business. But I want you to know that if you need anything at all, you call me. I've worked for a lot of wealthy families, and I can tell the difference between good people and bad people. Emily squeezed his hand gratefully. It meant more than he could know to have at least one ally in Alex's world. The penthouse felt different when Emily walked in, smaller somehow, despite its enormous size. The place that had once felt like a palace now felt like a museum, all expensive surfaces and cold perfection with no warmth or life. Alex was in his study, as she'd expected, and he looked up when she appeared in the doorway. He seemed genuinely surprised to see her, which suggested he'd assumed her trip to Chicago meant she was fleeing permanently. Emily, he said, standing up from his desk. You're back. I'm back. They stared at each other across the room, and Emily could see Alex trying to read her expression, to gauge what she'd decided during her time away. How was your visit with Sarah? Enlightening, Emily said simply. Alex moved closer, and Emily noticed he looked tired, older than he had just a week ago. The stress of maintaining his double life was apparently taking its toll. I'm glad you're home. I've had time to think while you were away, and I realize I've made some terrible mistakes. I want to fix this. I want to fix us. Emily studied her husband's face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse or honesty. What she saw instead was the same calculated performance he'd been giving her for months, maybe years. What about Sophia? It's over. Completely over. I told her it was a mistake, that my family comes first. The lie came so easily, delivered with such apparent sincerity, that Emily almost admired the skill involved. If she didn't know about the FBI surveillance, about the money laundering, about the criminal conspiracy Sophia was helping to coordinate, she might have believed him. I see, Emily said neutrally. Emily, I know I've hurt you terribly, and I know it will take time to rebuild the trust between us. But I love you, and I love Grace, and I want us to be a family. What about the money? Alex's expression flickered slightly. What money? The payments for Sophia's apartment, the trips, the jewelry? What about the financial irregularities in your business accounts? This time Alex's mask slipped completely, and Emily saw a flash of something cold and dangerous in his eyes. Emily, I don't know what lies someone has been filling your head with while you were in Chicago, but you need to be very careful about making accusations you can't prove. There it was, the threat, delivered just as Agent Chen had predicted it would be. Alex was warning her off, trying to intimidate her into backing down. Is that a threat, Alex? It's friendly advice. You're about to become a mother. Emily, the last thing you want is to get involved in complex business matters you don't understand. Emily nodded as if she were considering his words. Inside, she was cataloging every phrase for the federal agents who would be reviewing the recording from the wire she was wearing. You're right, she said finally. I should focus on the baby. Relief flooded Alex's face. Exactly. That's all that matters now, our family, our future together. I'm going to lie down, Emily said. The flight was exhausting. Of course, I'll be in meetings for the rest of the afternoon, but maybe we can have dinner together tonight, just the two of us, like old times. That sounds nice, Emily lied. In their bedroom, Emily sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process what had just happened. Alex had threatened her again, but he'd also revealed something crucial. He genuinely believed she was backing down, that his intimidation tactics were working. He had no idea that she was now working with federal agents to destroy him. Her phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chen. Good work. Keep acting normal. We'll be in touch soon with next steps. Emily deleted the message and lay down on the bed, one hand on her belly where Grace was doing her afternoon aerobics routine. Almost time, baby girl, she whispered. Mama just needs to finish taking care of some business first. That evening's dinner was a surreal experience. Alex had made reservations at their favorite restaurant, the same place where he'd proposed 5 years earlier. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely focused on rebuilding their relationship. If Emily hadn't known better, she might have believed his performance. He asked about her trip to Chicago, expressed concern about her health and the baby's development, and even brought up names for Grace's nursery that he'd been considering while she was away. I know I've been distracted lately, Alex said over dessert, but I want you to know that you and Grace are the most important things in my life. Everything I do for our family. Emily nodded and smiled in all the right places, playing the role of the reconciling wife while the recording device taped to her chest captured every word of Alex's lies. I want that too, she said. I want us to be a real family. We will be, Alex said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. I promise you, Emily, everything is going to be different from now on. As they left the restaurant, Alex's phone rang. Emily saw Sophia's name on the screen before Alex quickly declined the call. Business, Emily asked innocently. Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow, Alex said smoothly. But Emily had seen the tension that crossed his face when Sophia's name appeared. Whatever was happening with his criminal enterprise, It wasn't as under control as he wanted Emily to believe. That night, as Alex slept beside her, Emily stared at the ceiling and thought about how many lies she'd heard in a single evening. Alex had promised to change, to put their family first, to be the husband she deserved. But Emily knew the truth. Alex Kane was incapable of change because Alex Kane was fundamentally corrupt. He'd been lying to her for so long that he'd forgotten how to tell the truth, even to himself. Tomorrow, Emily would begin the final phase of her plan. By the time she was done, Alex would understand exactly what happened when you threatened Emily Thompson Kane, and the whole world would know what kind of man Alex Kane really was. The next morning brought unseasonably warm November weather to Manhattan, the kind of day that felt like a gift from the universe. Emily stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, watching the city wake up below, and felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. Today was the day everything would change. Alex had left early for a breakfast meeting, kissing Emily's forehead and promising to be home for lunch so they could continue rebuilding their marriage. Emily had smiled and waved goodbye, knowing it would likely be the last normal interaction they'd ever have. At 9 o'clock, Emily's phone rang. Agent Chen, Mrs. Kane, we're ready to move forward. Based on the recordings from last night, we have enough evidence to obtain warrants for your husband's arrest and the seizure of Kane Industries' financial records. When, this afternoon, we want to coordinate the arrest with your divorce filing to maximize the impact and minimize your husband's ability to destroy evidence or flee. Emily felt her heart rate spike. Arrests, plural. Your husband and Ms. Martin, along with 3 other individuals connected to the money laundering operation. Mrs. Kane, when this happens, it's going to be chaos. Are you prepared for that? Emily looked around the penthouse one last time, at the expensive artwork and designer furniture that had never felt like home. I'm prepared. Good. Catherine Walsh is filing your divorce papers at 2 o'clock. We'll execute the arrest warrants at the same time. I need you to be somewhere safe when this happens, somewhere with witnesses who can verify your whereabouts. I'll be at my doctor's appointment, Emily said. I have a checkup scheduled for 2:30. Perfect. Mrs. Kane, I want you to know that what you've done here, the courage you've shown in helping us expose this criminal network, it's going to save lives. After Agent Chen hung up, Emily sat in the silence of the penthouse and tried to process the fact that in a few hours, her life as she'd known it would be over. Alex would be in federal custody. Their marriage would be front-page news, and she'd be a single mother preparing to give birth while her husband faced decades in prison. It should have terrified her. Instead, Emily felt free for the first time in months. At 11 o'clock, Alex returned home for their planned lunch, carrying flowers and wearing the kind of smile that had once made Emily's heart flutter. For my beautiful wife, he said, presenting her with a bouquet of white roses. I thought we could have lunch on the terrace and talk about our future. Emily accepted the flowers with appropriate gratitude, all while the recording device captured Alex's performance for federal prosecutors. They're beautiful. Alex, thank you. Over lunch, Alex was more attentive than he'd been in months, asking about Emily's plans for Grace's nursery, discussing possible vacation destinations for after the baby was born, and generally acting like the devoted husband he'd never actually been. I've been thinking, Alex said as they shared dessert, maybe we should renew our vows after Grace is born. Have a small ceremony, just family and close friends, to celebrate our new beginning. Emily marveled at his ability to lie so convincingly while federal agents were preparing to arrest him. Did he genuinely believe his own deceptions, or was this all just another manipulation? That sounds lovely, Emily said, though we should probably wait until after Grace is sleeping through the night. Of course. I want everything to be perfect for our girls. At 1:30, Emily excused herself to get ready for her doctor's appointment. As she gathered her purse and jacket, Alex caught her hand. Emily, I want you to know how grateful I am that you're giving us another chance. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I promise you won't regret it. Emily looked into her husband's eyes and saw nothing but calculated performance. Even now, with federal agents closing in, Alex was still playing the role of the repentant husband. "I know you'll do better," Emily said simply. James drove her to Dr. Martinez's office, and Emily spent the short trip staring out the window at the city rushing past. Somewhere in Manhattan, federal agents were preparing to arrest her husband and destroy the criminal network he'd helped build. Dr. Martinez's examination was routine, blood pressure slightly elevated, but within normal range. Grace's heart beat strong and steady, everything progressing normally toward delivery. "How are you feeling emotionally?" Dr. Martinez asked, just as she always did. Emily considered the question seriously. How was she feeling? Knowing that her husband was about to be arrested for money laundering and conspiracy, knowing that her marriage was ending and her daughter would grow up without her father. "Better than I have in months," Emily said honestly. Dr. Martinez studied her face with the keen eye of someone who'd been dealing with pregnant women for decades. "Emily, is everything all right at home last time you were here? I was concerned about your stress levels." "Everything's fine," Emily said. "Actually, some problems I've been dealing with are about to be resolved." At exactly 2:45, Emily's phone rang. Catherine Walsh. "Emily, it's done. The divorce papers are filed, and according to my contact at the FBI, the arrests are happening now." Emily closed her eyes and felt something like relief wash over her. Alex is in federal custody as of 10 minutes ago. Sophia Martin too, along with 3 other individuals. "Emily, this is going to be the biggest financial crime story of the year. Are you ready?" "I'm ready." Emily left Dr. Martinez's office and asked James to drive her to Sarah's law firm in Midtown. She needed to be somewhere safe and surrounded by people when the news broke. As they drove through Manhattan traffic, Emily's phone started ringing. First reporters, then friends, then numbers she didn't recognize. Word was getting out fast. "Mrs. K," James said, catching her eye in the rearview mirror. "Whatever's happening, you did the right thing." Emily looked at her phone, which was now buzzing with calls and text messages every few seconds. In a few hours, she'd be the most famous pregnant woman in America, the billionaire's wife who'd brought down her husband's criminal empire. But for now, in the quiet of the car with Grace doing somersaults in her belly, Emily felt nothing but peace. Alex Kane had threatened her, tried to intimidate her, assumed she was too weak and too naive to fight back. He'd just learned how wrong he was, and the whole world was about to find out exactly what happened when you underestimated Emily Thompson Kane. The first news alert hit Emily's phone at 3:17 p.m. Breaking: billionaire tech CEO Alexander Kane arrested on federal money laundering charges. By 3:30, the story had exploded across every major news network. Emily watched from Sarah's law office conference room as CNN ran a split screen showing Alex in handcuffs being led from Kane Industries headquarters, while a reporter breathlessly explained the scope of the federal investigation. Sources tell CNN that Kane's arrest is connected to a multi-million-dollar money laundering operation with ties to Russian organized crime, the reporter said. In a related development, Kane's wife Emily has filed for divorce, citing adultery and financial fraud. Emily's phone hadn't stopped ringing since the news broke. Reporters, friends, distant relatives she hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know what Emily Thompson Kane knew and when she'd known it. Catherine Walsh fielded most of the calls while Emily watched her husband's empire collapse in real time on live television. Kane Industries' stock price had been suspended after falling 60% in 30 minutes. The company's offices were swarming with federal agents executing search warrants. Board members were issuing statements distancing themselves from Alex's actions. "Emily," Catherine said, hanging up after her latest conversation with a reporter. 60 Minutes wants an exclusive interview. So do Anderson Cooper, Oprah, and about 15 other programs. "What do you want to do?" Emily considered the question while watching footage of Sophia Martin being arrested outside her Tribeca apartment. The woman who destroyed Emily's marriage looked small and frightened in handcuffs. Nothing like the confident executive who'd seduced a billionaire. Not yet, Emily said. Let the story develop for a few days. I want to see what Alex and his lawyers say before I decide how to respond. Smart. Emily, you should know the media is portraying you very sympathetically. The pregnant wife who discovered her husband's crimes and did the right thing despite personal cost. The narrative is working in your favor. Emily nodded, though she wondered how long the sympathetic coverage would last. Eventually, someone would start asking harder questions about what she'd known and when. The fact that she'd been working with federal agents would come out, and then the story would become more complicated. At 4 o'clock, Sarah arrived at the law office with coffee and sandwiches that Emily couldn't eat. Her sister took one look at the chaos of ringing phones and concerned lawyers and immediately understood why Emily had fled to Chicago. "How are you holding up?" Sarah asked, settling into the chair beside Emily. "I'm fine. Better than fine. Actually, it's done." Sarah, "The worst part is over." "Is it, Emily? This is just the beginning. Alex is going to fight this, and it's going to get ugly." Emily turned away from the television, where financial analysts were explaining how Kane Industries' collapse would affect global tech markets. "Let him fight. He's the one who chose to threaten a pregnant woman rather than accept responsibility for his actions." Sarah studied her sister's face with concern. "Em, you're scaring me a little. You seem, I don't know, too calm for someone whose life just imploded on national television." Emily considered Sarah's words. She should be devastated. Probably. Her marriage was over. Her husband was facing decades in prison, and she was about to become a single mother in the most public way possible. But instead of devastation, she felt something like relief. "Sarah, I've spent the last year feeling like I was slowly disappearing. Like I was becoming nothing more than Alex Kane's pregnant wife, with no thoughts or desires or worth of my own. Today, I remembered who I was before I met him." "And who is that?" Emily smiled for the first time that day. "Someone who doesn't let anyone threaten her family." At 5 o'clock, Emily's phone rang with a number she recognized: Alex's lawyer, David Morrison, calling from what was presumably the federal courthouse where Alex was being arraigned. "Emily, this is David Morrison. I'm calling on behalf of Alex to see if we can arrange a meeting to discuss." "No," Emily said simply. "I'm sorry. I said no. I have no interest in meeting with Alex or discussing anything with him through intermediaries." "Emily, I think you should know that Alex is very concerned about your welfare and the baby's health. This stress can't be good for either of you." "Mr. Morrison," Emily interrupted, "Alex had 18 months to be concerned about my welfare. He chose to spend that time laundering money for Russian criminals and planning to divorce me after I gave birth to his child. So no, I won't be meeting with him, and you can tell him that any future communications should go through my attorney." Emily hung up and immediately called Agent Chen. "Agent Chen, Alex's lawyer just called trying to arrange a meeting. Should I be concerned about intimidation attempts?" "Probably just standard legal maneuvering, but we'll monitor the situation. Mrs. Kane, you should know that your husband is being held without bail pending his arraignment tomorrow. The judge considered him a flight risk given his international business connections and the serious nature of the charges." "What about Sophia? Also being held without bail?" "Mrs. Kane, based on evidence we've seized today, we believe Ms. Martin was the primary architect of the money laundering scheme. She may have specifically targeted your husband because of his company's international reach and his personal vulnerabilities." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "You're saying she seduced Alex as part of the criminal conspiracy?" "We're still investigating, but yes, that appears to be the case. Mrs. Kane, your husband may have been as much a victim as a perpetrator in some aspects of this scheme." After Agent Chen hung up, Emily sat in the conference room staring at her reflection in the darkened window. Outside, Manhattan was lighting up for the evening. Millions of people going about their normal lives while hers had just been turned upside down. But the strange thing was, Emily realized, She didn't feel like a victim. Alex might have been manipulated by Sophia, but he'd made his own choices. He'd chosen to cheat on his pregnant wife. He'd chosen to lie to her for months. He'd chosen to threaten her when she'd discovered the truth. Whatever sympathy Emily might have felt for Alex was overshadowed by one crucial fact when given the choice between protecting his family and protecting himself. Alex had chosen himself. At 7 o'clock, Catherine Walsh gathered Emily, Sarah, and the rest of their impromptu crisis management team around the conference table. Okay, people, here's where we stand. The criminal case is separate from our divorce proceedings, but they're obviously related. Emily, the good news is that with Alex's assets likely to be frozen or seized, the prenuptial agreement becomes largely irrelevant. The bad news is that there may not be much left to fight over by the time this is resolved. What do you mean? Sarah asked. I mean that if the government can prove Kane Industries was primarily a vehicle for money laundering, they can seize virtually everything. Emily could end up with nothing more than what she can prove she owned independently before the marriage. Emily had been prepared for this possibility. What about child support for Grace? Difficult to collect from someone serving 20 to life in federal prison with no assets, Catherine said bluntly. Emily, I need you to understand you might end up raising your daughter on whatever you can earn yourself. The thought should have terrified Emily. Instead, she found herself thinking about the successful law practice she'd built before meeting Alex, about the skills and intelligence that had attracted him to her in the first place. That's fine, Emily said. I supported myself before I met Alex, and I can do it again. Catherine looked impressed. Okay then, Emily, there's one more thing we need to discuss. The federal prosecutors want to know if you'd be willing to testify against your husband if this goes to trial. Emily thought about Alex's threats, about his casual dismissal of her concerns, about the way he'd planned to discard her after using her to provide him with an heir and unwitting cover for his crimes. Yes, she said without hesitation. I'll testify against him. As the meeting broke up and Emily prepared to leave for Sarah's hotel, she caught sight of herself in the conference room's windows, a pregnant woman in an expensive dress, surrounded by the debris of a billionaire's empire. But for the first time in months, Emily Thompson Kane looked like herself again. Emily woke up in Sarah's hotel suite to find her face on the front page of every major newspaper in America. The New York Times led with "Billionaire's Pregnant Wife Exposes Money Laundering Network." The Washington Post went with "The Fall of Alexander Kane, How a Tech Empire Built on Crime Collapsed." Even the tabloids had gotten into the act. The New York Post headline simply read, "Wife's Revenge," above a photo of Emily looking dignified despite her obvious pregnancy. "You're famous," Sarah said, spreading the newspapers across the hotel room's coffee table. Like, really famous. Emily studied the coverage while eating breakfast. Most of the reporting was sympathetic, the loyal wife who discovered her husband's crimes and courageously cooperated with federal authorities despite being 7 months pregnant. But Emily could already see hints of the more skeptical coverage that would come later. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing to a sidebar in USA Today. What Did She Know explores the question of whether Emily Kane could have been unaware of her husband's criminal activities for 18 months. Emily sighed. She'd known this was coming, the inevitable scrutiny of her own actions, the suggestion that she must have been either complicit or criminally naive. It doesn't matter what they write about me. The truth is the truth. Emily, you need to control this narrative before it gets away from you. Catherine's right about doing interviews. Before Emily could respond, her phone rang. Dr. Martinez. Emily, I saw the news. How are you feeling? This level of stress can't be good for you or the baby. I'm fine, Dr. Martinez. Actually, I feel better than I have in months. I'd still like to see you today if possible. This kind of media attention and legal stress can trigger premature labor, and at 36 weeks, we need to be cautious. Emily agreed to an appointment that afternoon, then spent the morning fielding calls from lawyers, reporters, and well-meaning friends. Alex's arraignment was scheduled for 11 o'clock, and every major news network was providing live coverage. Emily watched from the hotel room as her husband, dressed in an orange jumpsuit and looking haggard after a night in federal custody, was led into the courthouse. The charges against him were staggering: conspiracy to commit money laundering, violations of the Bank Secrecy Act, conspiracy to violate sanctions against Russian individuals and entities, and tax evasion. If convicted on all counts, he could face life in prison. The defendant will remain in federal custody pending trial, the judge announced after prosecutors argued that Alex posed a flight risk and a danger to potential witnesses. Bail is denied. Emily felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness watching the man she'd once loved being led back to his cell. Alex had destroyed their marriage and betrayed her trust, but seeing him in handcuffs still hurt in ways she hadn't expected. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I hope you're happy. You've destroyed an innocent man and ruined your daughter's future. Some wife." Emily stared at the message, her hands shaking slightly. Someone, probably one of Alex's supporters or business associates, was already trying to intimidate her. She forwarded the message to Agent Chen and blocked the number. At Dr. Han Martinez's office that afternoon, Emily's blood pressure was elevated but not dangerously so. Grace's heartbeat was strong, and her positioning suggested she was preparing for delivery. "Emily, I want you to consider the possibility that this stress might trigger early labor," Dr. Martinez said. "At 36 weeks, Grace would be fine if she came now, but I'd prefer she stay put for another few weeks." "I'm trying to stay calm," Emily said. "But this is just the beginning. The trial could take months or even years. Then you need to find ways to insulate yourself from the worst of the media coverage." "Emily, I've delivered babies to other women in high-profile situations, and I can tell you that constant stress is dangerous for both mother and child." As Emily left the doctor's office, she realized Dr. Martinez was right. She couldn't spend the next several weeks obsessing over every news story or social media post about her situation. She needed to focus on preparing for Grace's arrival and building a new life for both of them. That evening, Emily made two important decisions. First, she called Catherine Walsh and agreed to do a single, carefully controlled interview with Anderson Cooper. If she was going to tell her side of the story, she wanted to do it right. Second, she called a realtor and began looking for a new place to live. She had no interest in raising Grace in the penthouse where Alex had brought his mistress, and besides, the FBI had seized most of Alex's assets anyway. Emily would need something she could afford on her own income once she returned to practicing law. The realtor, a kind woman named Margaret Chen, apparently half of New York was named Chen, had several options in her price range, a far cry from the luxury Emily had grown accustomed to, but comfortable and safe for a single mother and her daughter. "Mrs. Kane," Margaret said as they toured a two-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side, "I have to ask, are you sure you want to stay in Manhattan with all the media attention? You might find more privacy in Connecticut or New Jersey." Emily looked out the apartment's window at the tree-lined street below, imagining herself pushing Grace's stroller along these sidewalks, maybe running into other mothers at the nearby park. "I'm not running away," Emily said. "New York is my home." That night, as Emily lay in bed at Sarah's hotel, she felt Grace moving restlessly in her belly. Her daughter seemed to sense the upheaval in their lives, kicking more frequently and with more force than usual. "I know, baby girl," Emily whispered, placing both hands on her belly. "Everything's changing, but we're going to be okay. Mama's going to make sure of that." As if in response, Grace delivered a particularly forceful kick that made Emily gasp. "Easy there, Grace. Save some of that fight for the outside world. You're going to need it." Emily's phone buzzed with another unknown number, but this time the message was different. "Mrs. Kane, I work at Kane Industries, and I want you to know that most of us support what you did. Alex Kane fooled a lot of people, but you had the courage to expose the truth." Emily smiled as she read the message. For every person trying to intimidate her, there seemed to be another offering support. Maybe the media narrative wouldn't be as negative as she'd feared. As she drifted off to sleep, Emily thought about the Anderson Cooper interview scheduled for next week. She'd have one chance to tell her story to the world, to explain why she'd made the choices she'd made and what she hoped to achieve for her daughter's future. She was going to make it count. The Anderson Cooper interview was scheduled for Tuesday evening, but on Monday morning, Emily woke up to contractions that immediately sent her into panic mode. Sarah, she called from the hotel bathroom, where she'd been doubled over in pain for the past 10 minutes. Something's wrong. Sarah rushed in, took one look at Emily's face, and immediately called for a taxi. We're going to the hospital. Now. The ride to Mount Sinai felt like an eternity, with Emily timing contractions that seemed to be coming every 5 minutes. At 36 weeks and 3 days, Grace would be considered full-term, but Emily had hoped for a few more weeks to get her life settled before her daughter arrived. This is probably false labor, Emily told herself as they rushed through the hospital's emergency entrance. Just stress from everything that's happened. But Dr. Martinez's examination revealed that Emily was already 4 centimeters dilated, and her contractions were consistent and strong. Emily, you're in active labor, Dr. Martinez said gently. Grace has decided she's ready to meet the world. But I'm not ready, Emily said, tears streaming down her face. Alex is in jail. I don't have a place to live. I haven't even done the interview yet. I'm not ready to be a single mother. Dr. Martinez sat on the edge of the hospital bed and took Emily's hand. Emily, women have been having babies in difficult circumstances for thousands of years. You're strong, you're smart, and you have people who love you. You're ready. The next 12 hours were a blur of pain, exhaustion, and overwhelming emotion. Sarah held Emily's hand through each contraction while fielding calls from reporters who somehow learned that Alex Kane's pregnant wife was in labor. Catherine Walsh stationed security guards outside Emily's room to keep photographers and journalists away. At 3:47 a.m. on Tuesday morning, Grace Elizabeth Kane made her entrance into the world, weighing 7 pounds, 2 ounces, and announcing her arrival with a cry that could probably be heard throughout the maternity ward. She's perfect, Dr. Martinez said, placing Grace on Emily's chest. Absolutely perfect. Emily looked down at her daughter, her dark hair still damp from birth, her tiny fists waving indignantly. Her eyes scrunched shut against the bright hospital lights, and felt her heart break open with a love so intense it was almost frightening. Hello, Grace, Emily whispered. Emily, I'm your mama, and I promise you, everything is going to be okay. Grace's eyes opened at the sound of Emily's voice, and for a moment they stared at each other. Mother and daughter meeting for the first time outside the womb. She knows you, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. Look how she's looking at you. Emily had expected Grace's birth to be the most joyful moment of her life, but instead it was bittersweet. This should have been a moment shared with Alex. Should have been the beginning of their family's life together. Instead, Emily was holding their daughter while Alex sat in a federal detention center awaiting trial for money laundering. The next few hours brought a parade of visitors, nurses checking on Emily and Grace, lactation consultants helping with breastfeeding, hospital administrators trying to manage the media circus surrounding Grace's birth. Emily's parents flew in from Oregon, her father gruff with emotion as he held his granddaughter for the first time. She looks like you did as a baby, Emily's mother said, studying Grace's face. Same determined expression, same way of looking at the world like she's sizing it up. I hope she gets my stubbornness, Emily said. She's going to need it. The one person who didn't visit was Alex. Emily had wondered if he would try to send messages through his lawyers or attempt to have Grace brought to see him, but apparently even Alex understood that their daughter's birth was not an appropriate time for legal maneuvering. On Wednesday afternoon, as Emily was preparing to take Grace home to Sarah's hotel, Catherine Walsh arrived with news that changed everything. Emily, I just got off the phone with the federal prosecutors. They want to offer you a deal. What kind of deal, mate? Full immunity from prosecution in exchange for your testimony against Alex and access to any evidence you might have? They,